They sold him the Chinese girl as a joke, never knowing he'd make her the pride of the plain. Samuel stood at the edge of the bustling market, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. The sun had barely climbed over the horizon, painting the endless plains with shades of gold and brown, but already the market was alive with the sound of merchants shouting, wagons creaking, and the occasional whinny of horses tethered nearby. Samuel had come to town to buy supplies, tools, seeds, a few sacks of flour, but somehow his eyes kept wandering to the unusual sights around him. It was a place of surprises where travelers from far-off places brought things no one in the plains had ever seen. Some items were useful, others strange, and a few were downright mysterious. As he wandered between the stalls, Samuel noticed a group of men gathered in a corner, whispering and laughing. Curious, he moved closer. On the ground in front of them sat a young girl, no older than 16, her dark hair braided neatly down her back. Her eyes, wide and cautious, flicked between the men, the crowd, and the horizon beyond. Samuel couldn't tell where she had come from, but there was something in her gaze that made him pause, a quiet intelligence, almost as if she were studying him as much as he was studying her. The men noticed him lingering and nudged each other, smirking. "Hey, stranger," one of them called. "You look like a man who likes surprises. How about a deal?" Samuel frowned. He had been warned before about the tricky merchants in town. Many of them loved to play jokes or sell things that didn't exist, hoping to take advantage of newcomers or honest ranchers like him. But he was tired from the journey and wanted to finish his errands quickly. "What kind of deal?" Samuel asked, his voice steady but wary. The men exchanged sly looks. "Well," said one, scratching his chin, "we have here a very special offer. For a few coins, you could take her home. She's very useful, they say. Good with chores, smart, fast learner. Could make life easier out here on the plains." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He had never been in a situation like this before. His mind raced with questions. Was this girl really for sale? Could he trust these men? And why would anyone think it was acceptable to sell a human being even as a joke? Yet something in him, the same curiosity that had brought him so far west, made him stop and listen more carefully. The men laughed, seeing his hesitation. "Come on, stranger," another said. "It's all in good fun, just a little joke on a lonely rancher. But maybe you'll like it. Maybe you'll see what she can do." They waved him toward the girl as if presenting an object in a shop, their laughter echoing in the open air. Samuel took a deep breath. He knew this was no ordinary transaction. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him. Yet he also noticed how calm the girl appeared, even in this strange situation. She didn't cry, didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, steady and unafraid, and for a moment Samuel felt something he could not explain, a sense that perhaps she was meant to be here, in his life, no matter how unexpected or strange it seemed. He counted his coins slowly, making sure he had enough. The men smirked as he handed them the payment, treating it almost like a ceremonial gesture. With a quick nod, Samuel turned to May. The girl had finally spoken her name quietly when asked, and motioned for her to come with him. She moved cautiously at first, but then her steps became steadier, her posture straighter, as if she were making a silent promise to herself. She would rise to meet whatever life awaited her here. The journey back to the ranch was long. The plains stretched endlessly on either side of the dirt trail, a sea of grasses and gentle hills, under a sky so wide it made Samuel feel small and vulnerable. May rode beside him silently, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Samuel tried to speak, to fill the awkward silence, but words seemed inadequate. How could he explain that this strange, unexpected turn of events might just change both of their lives forever? By the time the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, painting the sky with pink and orange, they arrived at the ranch. Samuel had built a modest cabin, sturdy enough to withstand the harsh winds and winters of the plains. The land surrounding it was wide and empty, dotted with patches of grass and a few sturdy trees. It was a lonely place, but a place of opportunity, where one could build something lasting if one had patience and determination. May stepped off the wagon carefully, her eyes taking in the landscape. Samuel watched her, wondering what she was thinking. Perhaps she was remembering a life left behind, or perhaps she was already imagining how to make this unfamiliar place her own. Whatever her thoughts, Samuel realized that he could not view her as merely a worker or a helper. She was a person with hopes, fears, and dreams, and he needed to treat her with respect if this unexpected arrangement was to succeed. That first evening, Samuel showed May the cabin and the small garden he had started near the back. They cooked a simple meal over the fire, sharing bread and beans, and Samuel learned a little about her past. May spoke softly, telling him about the journey that had brought her here, about the difficulties she had faced, and about the small moments of hope that had kept her moving forward. Her voice was calm, yet carried the weight of experiences far beyond her years. Samuel listened, realizing that this young girl, who had been sold as a cruel joke, was stronger than many men he knew. Over the next few days, Samuel introduced May to the routines of ranch life. She learned quickly, mastering the care of the animals and the planting of crops with a surprising ease. Her hands were skilled, her mind quick to grasp even the most complicated tasks. Samuel began to notice something extraordinary. May was not just adapting, she was excelling. Her presence brought a new energy to the ranch, a sense of possibility that Samuel hadn't felt in years of working alone. Neighbors began to take notice. At first, their curiosity was mixed with judgment. "Who is that girl?" they would whisper. "How did she end up out here on the plains?" But over time, as they saw her skills and her kindness toward the animals and Samuel, the whispers turned to admiration. The same people who had once doubted her abilities began to respect her courage and her strength. Samuel watched quietly, proud not only of her work but of the way she carried herself, with dignity, grace, and an unshakable resolve. Samuel often reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought May into his life. A cruel joke at the market had seemed like a misfortune, yet it had led to a partnership unlike any he could have imagined. He realized that sometimes life's unexpected turns could bring the greatest rewards, not because they were planned, but because they revealed the character and potential of those involved. May had arrived as an outsider, someone no one had expected, yet she was already becoming the heart of the ranch, the spark that made life richer and more meaningful. As the first winter approached, Samuel and May worked side by side, preparing the ranch for the harsh months ahead. They repaired fences, gathered firewood, and tended the animals, each day growing more accustomed to one another. Samuel began to understand that this partnership was not just about work. It was about trust, respect, and shared determination. May had come into his life unexpectedly, but she was becoming something far more important than a servant or helper. She was becoming a friend, a confidant, and someone who would change the course of his lonely existence forever. By the time snow began to fall softly across the plains, Samuel looked at May and saw not a girl sold in a cruel joke, but a remarkable young woman with courage, skill, and a quiet strength that could withstand the harshest storms. And for the first time in a long while he felt hope, not just for himself, but for the life they could build together, out here in the vast open plains where anything seemed possible. if one had patience, courage, and heart. Life on the plains was never easy, and Samuel quickly realized that bringing May to the ranch was only the beginning of their journey. The wide-open land with its golden grasses stretching to the horizon looked peaceful in the morning sunlight, but it hid many challenges. Harsh winds, unpredictable storms, and long, lonely days tested anyone who tried to live there. Samuel had learned to manage alone, but now he had May with him, and he felt a new responsibility. He had to ensure not only that the ranch survived, but that she was safe, comfortable, and able to adapt to this strange, wild place. May, for her part, approached each day with quiet determination. She had endured hardships before, but life on the plains was a new test entirely. Her hands, though small, proved steady and strong, able to handle the chores that took Samuel years to perfect. She learned quickly how to mend fences, feed the animals, and tend to the garden. Her mind absorbed the lessons like a sponge, remembering every instruction, every tip Samuel gave. But the work was not easy, and often she would rise before dawn, move silently among the animals, and work late into the evening as the sun dipped behind the hills. She rarely complained, and even when she was tired or cold, she met each day with calmness and focus. Samuel admired her courage, though he did not always know how to express it. At first he had been hesitant, unsure how to guide her without seeming harsh. He worried that she might leave or resent him, that the joke played at the market might turn into a real source of anger. But May's resilience surprised him. She seemed to understand that life required effort, patience, and trust. She did not judge him for the circumstances that had brought them together. Instead, she embraced the new life with open eyes and a willingness to learn. Despite their progress, not everyone in the nearby town welcomed May. Some townspeople were suspicious, whispering behind hands or shaking their heads when Samuel and May walked into town for supplies. "Why would a man bring a girl like that out here?" they murmured. She doesn't belong on the plains." Their words stung Samuel more than he cared to admit. He could sense their prejudice and their fear of someone different joining their small, tightly knit community. But he also noticed that May remained composed. She never allowed their doubts to shake her, never let their unkind whispers cloud her spirit. She simply continued her work, learning, helping, and proving herself quietly every day. There were moments, though, when Samuel feared she might be overwhelmed. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in from the west. Rain lashed the fields and lightning streaked across the sky. The animals panicked, huddling together in the barn as the wind howled. Samuel shouted instructions to May over the roar of the storm, but she moved calmly, directing the animals, securing the gates, and making sure no one was hurt. Samuel realized in that moment that May had more courage than he had ever imagined. Her strength wasn't loud or flashy. It was steady, reliable, and deeply reassuring. As the weeks passed, the bond between them grew. They began to share stories while working. May told Samuel about her childhood in a distant village, about her family and the small joys she had cherished despite difficult times. Samuel spoke of his life on the plains, of the struggles he had faced alone, and of the dreams he still hoped to achieve. Slowly, trust and friendship formed, like the first shoots of grass breaking through hard soil. They laughed together, shared meals, and learned to rely on each other, finding comfort in their companionship. Yet challenges were never far away. One morning, Samuel noticed tracks near the barn. Strange, heavy footprints that suggested someone had been watching the ranch during the night. It unnerved him. He knew the plains could be dangerous, with bandits, wild animals, and people with ill intentions moving through the area. He worried about May's safety, and for the first time he realized just how much he had come to care for her. Protecting the ranch now meant protecting her, too, and that responsibility weighed on him like never before. May sensed his concern, though she did not question him. Instead, she quietly learned about the dangers of the plains herself. She studied the animals' behavior, noticed patterns in the weather, and listened carefully to Samuel's warnings. She was careful to avoid unnecessary risks, but never shrank from hard work or the responsibilities she had willingly accepted. Her intelligence and caution impressed Samuel. It was one thing to endure physical labor, but it was another to navigate the social tensions of a town suspicious of her presence, the dangers of the plains, and the emotional challenge of starting a life in a completely new world. May faced all of it with remarkable calmness. Life also brought small joys. On quiet evenings, Samuel and May would sit outside, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the clouds, and the plains seemed endless and peaceful. Sometimes they would share simple meals of bread, beans, or stew, and talk about dreams for the future, ideas about expanding the ranch, planting more crops, or caring for more animals. In these moments, Samuel felt a sense of hope he had not known in years. Despite the hardships, the isolation, and the challenges, life felt full of possibility. Slowly, May began to gain recognition in the town. Word spread about her skills with the animals, her ability to tend the garden, and the way she managed the ranch along Samuel. The same people who had whispered suspiciously now offered polite greetings and sometimes even small tokens of appreciation. Fresh eggs, jars of preserves, or advice on how to improve the land. It was not instant acceptance, and some people remained doubtful. But May's consistent hard work and quiet dignity began to break down barriers. Samuel could see the change in people's attitudes, and it filled him with pride, not just for what May had accomplished, but for the character she displayed every day. As the first frost approached, Samuel and May faced yet another challenge, preparing the ranch for winter. Cold winds swept across the plains, and snow could arrive at any moment. They worked tirelessly, repairing fences, stacking firewood, and ensuring the animals had shelter and food. May, despite her smaller frame, lifted heavy logs, tended to the livestock, and made sure that nothing was overlooked. Samuel marveled at her determination, realizing that her presence had transformed the ranch, not just making it more efficient, but filling it with energy, purpose, and life. There were quiet moments of doubt, of course. Samuel sometimes wondered if he had done the right thing by bringing May into his world. The risks were real and the challenges unending, but each time he saw her courage, her skill, and her unwavering calm, he knew he had made the right choice. May was not just surviving, she was thriving, and in the process, she was making the ranch a better place, the community slowly accepting her, and Samuel's lonely life richer in ways he could never have predicted. By the end of the first year together, the ranch looked different. The fences were stronger, the animals healthier, and the garden more productive than Samuel had ever managed alone. Yet the greatest change was not in the land or the buildings. It was in the relationship between Samuel and May. They had learned to work together, to trust one another, and to face the challenges of the plains as partners. There was respect, admiration, and a growing sense of deep friendship. Samuel often thought about the cruel joke that had brought them together at the market. What had seemed like misfortune had become a blessing. May, too, had changed. The plains were harsh, but she had adapted. She had grown stronger, more confident, and capable of facing any challenge the land or life threw at her. The whispers of townspeople could no longer shake her. Instead, she focused on the tasks at hand, on learning, on helping Samuel, and on building a life where she could be proud of herself. The joke that had been played at her expense had failed to define her. She had taken control of her circumstances, shaping them into something positive and lasting. As winter settled in, covering the plains with a blanket of snow, Samuel and May stood together outside the cabin, looking over the land they had worked so hard to maintain. The wind blew cold, but they were prepared. The animals were safe, the firewood stacked, and the barn reinforced against storms. There was a quiet sense of accomplishment, a feeling that, despite all the hardships, they had survived and even thrived. Samuel realized that life on the plains was unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but also full of opportunities for those willing to work hard, take risks, and respect one another. In those moments, standing side by side with May, Samuel understood something important. Life was not about who you were or where you came from. It was about courage, perseverance, and character. May had arrived unexpectedly, the subject of a cruel joke, yet she had proven herself every day through skill, intelligence, and quiet determination. Samuel could see that she would continue to do great things, not just on the ranch, but wherever life might take her. And so, the plains, which had once seemed so lonely and harsh, now felt alive with possibility. Samuel and May had found in each other not only companionship, but strength. Together, they were ready to face whatever the next season might bring. Storms, challenges, or the unknown paths of life, knowing that their shared determination and trust could carry them through. The harsh world of the plains had tested them, but it had also revealed the courage, resilience, and quiet brilliance of the young girl once sold as a joke. As the months passed, May's presence on the ranch became more than just helpful. It became vital. She had grown into her role with remarkable skill, and Samuel had begun to realize that she was not only capable of handling the work, but often improved it. Where he had once struggled with the smallest tasks, May moved with ease, finding solutions he would never have imagined. She understood the animals instinctively, predicting when a horse might be sick or when a cow would give birth. She tended the garden with a careful hand, ensuring that the crops thrived even in difficult soil. Her talent seemed endless, and Samuel often marveled at her intelligence and determination. The town slowly began to notice the changes at the ranch. At first, it was subtle. Farmers passing by would glance at the well-kept fields, the neatly stacked firewood, or the healthy animals grazing peacefully. Then, conversations started to carry her name. "That girl," someone would say. "She's doing wonders for that ranch. Makes it look like a proper homestead." Others were skeptical. Some could not understand why Samuel had chosen to bring her out to the plains, and a few even whispered cruelly about her origins. But May remained unfazed. Her focus never wavered from her work, and gradually, people's skepticism began to turn into respect. Samuel watched quietly as the transformation unfolded. He remembered the day at the market when she had been sold as a cruel joke, and he could hardly believe how far she had come. May, once a stranger with no claim to this land or this life, was now proving herself to be indispensable. Her courage and intelligence were becoming evident not only to Samuel, but to the wider community. And yet, she did not seek praise. She worked simply because it was needed, and because she understood that effort and care created lasting results. One day, a group of neighbors came to the ranch unexpectedly. They had heard of May's skills with animals and had brought a sick calf for her to examine. Samuel watched as she knelt beside the tiny creature, her hands gentle and precise. She checked its breathing, examined its coat, and mixed a small remedy using herbs she had brought with her. Within hours, The calf was standing, shaking off weakness, and looking healthier than it had in days. The neighbors were amazed. They had come to expect ordinary help from Samuel, but May had exceeded anything they could have imagined. Word spread quickly after that incident. People from surrounding farms began visiting, asking for her advice on caring for livestock or tending gardens. Some brought gifts of food, while others offered tools or seeds. Samuel noticed the change in their demeanor. They no longer whispered doubts. They approached respectfully, sometimes even bowing slightly as a sign of admiration. May's quiet determination had earned their trust, and the once mocking town had begun to recognize her as a remarkable young woman with skill, courage, and wisdom beyond her years. May herself remained humble. She did not boast about her accomplishments or seek attention. She worked tirelessly, rising before sunrise and continuing long after sunset. But Samuel could see that she began to take pride in her work, not for the approval of others, but for the satisfaction of knowing she could make a difference. She had learned to navigate the subtle dynamics of the town, earning respect while maintaining her dignity. Her quiet strength drew people to her, and even those who had been most skeptical could not deny her abilities or her character. Samuel also noticed changes in himself. Living alongside May had opened his eyes to new ways of thinking, to patience, and to the importance of collaboration. He had once been used to working alone, making decisions without consulting anyone, relying solely on his own judgment. But May's presence taught him that strength could come from partnership, that life was richer when shared with someone who cared, who contributed, and who challenged him in positive ways. Together they formed a team that was stronger than either could have been alone. One afternoon, a storm approached suddenly from the west. Dark clouds rolled in across the plains, and the wind picked up, howling through the tall grasses. Samuel and May worked quickly to secure the animals and reinforce the fences. The storm hit harder than expected, with rain pelting the ground and lightning striking in the distance. Samuel shouted over the roar, directing the livestock to shelter, but May moved calmly among them, guiding frightened animals with a steady hand. Her actions were precise, efficient, and full of care. Samuel felt a wave of pride and relief as he realized that she was capable of handling emergencies on her own, even when the wind and rain made everything chaotic. The storm passed by evening, leaving the plains wet but intact. The ranch had survived, and Samuel knew that they had weathered it not just because of preparation, but because of May's skill and bravery. He looked at her standing beside the barn, water dripping from her hair, her eyes bright with determination, and felt a deep respect he could hardly put into words. Eyes and friends, as a joke is present. Every day I turned to the dead. When I found a baby and felt with him. They worked together seamlessly, understanding each other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Samuel handled the larger tasks that required strength and experience, while May brought her intelligence, precision, and foresight to every decision. They planned the seasons together, prepared for winter, and cared for the animals with careful attention. Each day brought new challenges, from broken equipment to unpredictable weather, but together they faced each one, learning from mistakes and celebrating successes. The community continued to notice May's growing importance. Some farmers who had been hesitant before now asked for her advice openly. "She knows more than anyone I've ever met," one said quietly to Samuel. Others came seeking remedies for sick animals, knowing that May could find solutions when no one else could. Samuel felt a mix of pride and amazement. He had never imagined that the girl sold to him as a joke could become such an essential figure, not just on the ranch, but in the wider community. May's presence also began to change the town's attitude toward Samuel. People respected him not only for his own skills, but for his choice to bring her into his life and trust her abilities. What had once been the source of gossip, the strange partnership between a young Chinese girl and a rancher, had become a symbol of progress, courage, and mutual respect. Samuel felt gratitude not only toward May, but toward the unexpected path that had brought them together. The joke that had been played at the market could have led to anger or resentment, but instead it had led to growth, learning, and respect for both of them. Life, however, was not without its trials. There were moments when Samuel worried about May's safety in the wider world. Not everyone in town was accepting, and prejudice still lingered. He knew that some people might act unkindly if given the chance, but May's courage never faltered. She faced challenges with calmness and intelligence, earning respect through her actions rather than words. Her ability to stay composed under pressure reassured Samuel, and he began to understand that true strength often lay in quiet resilience rather than loud declarations. During this period, Samuel and May began to share more than work. They shared stories, hopes, and small dreams for the future. May spoke of her desire to learn more about the land, the animals, and the people. Samuel shared his plans for expanding the ranch, planting new crops, and caring for more animals. They laughed together over minor mistakes, like when a stubborn horse refused to follow the path Samuel had marked, or when May accidentally spilled seeds across the garden. These shared moments of humor, care, and mutual support strengthened their bond, making them more than just partners in work. They were becoming companions in life. By the end of this period, Samuel could see a remarkable transformation not only in May, but also in the ranch and the community around them. The animals were healthier, the crops more productive, and the land more carefully tended than Samuel had ever managed on his own. May had earned a place of respect and admiration, quietly changing the way the townspeople thought about her, Samuel, and what could be achieved through skill, courage, and dedication. Samuel often reflected on the journey that had brought May to his ranch. From the moment she had been sold as a cruel joke at the market, she had faced uncertainty, danger, and prejudice. Yet she had not only survived, she had thrived. Her strength, intelligence, and quiet determination had turned what could have been a misfortune into an extraordinary opportunity. Samuel realized that sometimes life's twists, even the unkind ones, could lead to unexpected blessings. He had gained a trusted partner, a skilled ally, and a friend whose presence made life richer and more meaningful. May had become more than a helper. She had become the heart of the ranch. Samuel knew that the coming seasons would bring new challenges, storms, harsh winters, and the unpredictability of life on the plains, but he also knew that together they could face anything. The young girl once sold as a joke had proven her worth through courage, intelligence, and steadfast dedication. And in doing so, she had begun to shape not only the ranch, but the perception of the community, showing everyone that strength, skill, and character could triumph over prejudice and doubt. The first signs of spring brought longer days, brighter skies, and a sense of hope across the plains. But they also carried the threat of unpredictable storms. Samuel had learned to respect the power of the land, and May had grown confident in her ability to manage the ranch. Together they worked tirelessly, tending the animals, planting crops, and repairing fences. Yet Samuel knew that the greatest tests were never the routine chores. They came in moments when the land itself seemed to challenge every effort they had made. One morning, as the sun rose slowly over the horizon, Samuel noticed dark clouds gathering far in the west. At first, they seemed distant, harmless streaks on the sky, but by mid-morning, the wind had picked up, carrying a cold bite that made Samuel pull his coat tighter. He glanced at May, who was tending the horses, and saw the same concern reflected in her eyes. Something was coming, and it would not be mild. By late morning, the storm had fully arrived. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled across the plains like a drum. Rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking the fields and turning the dirt paths to mud. The animals, unaccustomed to such sudden weather, panicked and scattered. Cows bellowed in fear, horses neighed and tried to bolt, and the smaller livestock huddled together, trembling. Samuel shouted instructions over the roar, trying to herd the animals toward the barn, but the chaos was overwhelming. May moved through the storm as if it were a familiar dance. Her voice was calm but firm, calling the animals by name, guiding them gently yet decisively toward safety. She knew which paths were safe, which fences could hold, and which animals needed extra care. Samuel followed, amazed at her skill and composure. Even in the heart of the storm, May remained steady, her determination shining like a beacon. She lifted frightened calves, soothed nervous horses, and adjusted gates that threatened to collapse under the wind. Every decision she made was precise, every movement purposeful. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of slowing. Samuel and May worked tirelessly, soaked to the bone, their hands blistered and aching. Lightning flashed dangerously close, striking a tree that fell across one of the fences. Samuel froze for a moment, fearing the worst, but May pushed forward without hesitation, clearing the debris and guiding the animals past the hazard. Her courage was remarkable, and Samuel realized that she was no longer the girl brought to the ranch as a joke. She was a hero, someone who could face the fiercest storms and protect those around her with skill, intelligence, and unwavering bravery. As the storm raged on, Samuel noticed that their neighbors had gathered at the edges of their own properties, watching the chaos unfold. Some tried to help, but many had retreated, afraid of the relentless wind and rain. May, however, did not think of herself or the danger. She focused only on the animals and the ranch, moving quickly and confidently through the mud and water. Her energy seemed endless, her determination unmatched, and Samuel could only follow, grateful for her guidance and presence. By late afternoon, the worst of the storm had passed, leaving the plains battered but intact. The animals were safe, the fences repaired, and the barn still standing. Samuel and May stood together, dripping wet, exhausted, but filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had faced the storm and won, not through luck, but through courage, intelligence, and teamwork. Samuel looked at May with admiration he could hardly put into words. She had proven herself in ways that no one could ignore, and he felt a deep pride in her strength and skill. News of their efforts spread quickly through the town. The neighbors who had once been skeptical came to visit, bringing supplies, food, and words of gratitude. "I heard what you did in the storm," one farmer said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anyone handle animals and weather like that. You saved more than just your ranch. You saved lives." Another added, "She's remarkable. You're lucky to have her, Samuel. She's more capable than anyone I've ever met." Samuel smiled quietly, knowing that the girl once sold as a joke had now become a symbol of courage and resilience for the entire community. May, however, did not let the praise distract her. She continued to work, checking on every animal, repairing any remaining damage, and ensuring that the ranch was fully restored. She was proud of what they had accomplished, not for recognition, but for the knowledge that they had protected the animals, the land, and each other. Samuel watched her, understanding more than ever that her true value lay not in public approval, but in her unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. In the weeks that followed, the ranch began to recover fully from the storm. Crops were replanted, fences strengthened, and the animals tended with extra care. May's reputation continued to grow. Townspeople who had doubted her skill now sought her advice, bringing their sick animals or asking for guidance on improving their own farms. Children watched her with wide eyes, inspired by her courage and intelligence. Samuel often observed these moments quietly, realizing that May had transformed not only the ranch but the perceptions and attitudes of everyone around her. Their partnership had also grown stronger in ways that went beyond work. Samuel and May had developed a rhythm together, anticipating each other's needs and responding to challenges as a team. They shared meals, stories, and quiet evenings watching the sunset over the plains. Samuel felt a sense of companionship he had never known before. The ranch, once lonely and isolated, now felt alive with energy and purpose, thanks to May's presence and the bond they had formed. One particularly quiet evening, after the storm had passed completely and the sky was filled with stars, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought May to his life. He remembered the market, the cruel joke, and the uncertainty of that first day. Now, months later, she was no longer an outsider, no longer a subject of laughter or skepticism. She had become the heart of the ranch, the pride of the plains, and a figure admired by the entire community. Her courage, skill, and resilience had turned a cruel joke into an extraordinary story of success, partnership, and respect. May, too, had changed. The harshness of the plains had not defeated her, it had strengthened her. She had faced storms, isolation, and doubt with unwavering determination, proving that true strength was not just in physical skill but in courage, intelligence, and character. Samuel knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they could face them together. She had become more than a helper. She was a partner, a friend, and someone who had earned a place of honor in the hearts of those around her. The story of that storm and May's heroism became well known in the town and surrounding areas. People spoke of her bravery, her skill with animals, and her unwavering calm in the face of danger. Samuel listened quietly, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief at how far she had come. The girl once sold as a joke had now become the pride of the plains, a living example of courage, resilience, and the power of quiet determination. As the season changed, bringing warmer days and new growth, Samuel and May continued to work together, tending the ranch with care, learning from each other, and preparing for whatever the future might hold. The bond they shared had been tested by storms, challenges, and prejudice, and it had emerged stronger than ever. Samuel often reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought May into his life, realizing that the cruel joke at the market had led to a partnership and friendship more valuable than anything he could have imagined. Through it all, one lesson became clear. Life on the plains was unpredictable, sometimes harsh and often challenging, but it also offered opportunities for courage, growth, and unexpected joy. May had arrived under unusual circumstances, but she had proven herself in every way that mattered. Her strength, intelligence, and character had transformed the ranch, the community, and Samuel's own understanding of what it meant to face life with determination and heart. And so, the plains, once a lonely and uncertain place, became a land of possibility, hope, and pride. Samuel and May had faced storms both literal and figurative, emerging stronger, wiser, and closer than ever. The girl who had been sold as a joke had become a symbol of courage and resilience, a living testament to the power of hard work, trust, and unwavering dedication. Samuel knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, ready to meet each challenge with courage, skill, and the unshakable bond that had carried them through the fiercest storms of their lives. The winter following the storm was long and harsh, with heavy snow covering the plains in a thick white blanket. For Samuel and May, life continued with its usual rhythm, yet the challenges of the season were far from over. Cold winds cut across the land, making every task more difficult. Animals required extra care. The cabin needed constant attention to stay warm, and food had to be carefully rationed to ensure it would last through the harsh months. Yet Samuel and May faced these difficulties together, as they had faced every challenge before, learning and relying on one another in ways neither had imagined when they first met. May had grown even more capable. Her skills with the animals, the land, and the tools of the ranch had reached a level that left Samuel in awe. She understood the subtle signs of illness in livestock, predicted storms with uncanny accuracy, and kept the homestead running smoothly even during the worst weather. But her strength was not just in her abilities, it was in her heart. She cared deeply for the animals, for Samuel, and for the life they were building together. That care and dedication shone through in every action, earning admiration and respect not only from Samuel, but from the wider community. The townspeople continued to notice her accomplishments. Word spread of her bravery during the storm, her skill with animals, and her intelligence in managing the ranch. Farmers and neighbors visited for advice, for remedies, or simply to witness the remarkable young woman who had transformed Samuel's ranch from an ordinary homestead into a thriving and admired property. Children watched her with wide eyes, inspired by her courage, and even the most skeptical adults had begun to accept and respect her fully. May had become the pride of the plains, not because she sought recognition, but because she had earned it through her actions, perseverance, and character. Samuel, too, had changed. The quiet man who had once lived alone on the plains, wary of the outside world, now felt a deep sense of connection to May, to the animals, and to the community. He had learned that true strength was not in facing challenges alone, but in sharing responsibility, trusting others, and valuing the contributions of those around him. May had taught him patience, humility, and the power of dedication. Together, they had turned a cruel joke into a story of triumph, respect, and friendship. Spring eventually returned to the plains, bringing life back to the fields and pastures. The snow melted, revealing green shoots of grass and buds on the trees. The ranch came alive once more, with animals grazing, crops growing, and the air filled with the sounds of nature. Samuel and May worked tirelessly, planting, repairing, and preparing for the months ahead. Each day they moved together as a team, anticipating each other's needs, sharing knowledge, and supporting one another through every task. Their partnership had become seamless, born of trust, mutual respect, and shared experience. As the year progressed, May's influence extended beyond the ranch. The town began to see her as a leader, someone who could solve problems, teach others, and bring people together. When disputes arose, neighbors sought her advice. When animals fell sick, they turned to her for remedies. Her intelligence, bravery, and compassion became a model for others. Samuel often watched in quiet pride, realizing that the girl once sold as a joke had grown into a figure of inspiration and admiration for everyone who knew her story. Despite her growing reputation, May remained humble. She did not boast or seek attention, preferring to focus on the work at hand. Yet her actions spoke volumes, leaving an impression far stronger than words ever could. She treated everyone with respect, even those who had once doubted her, showing kindness, patience, and understanding. Her ability to remain composed under pressure, to face challenges without complaint, and to act with intelligence and courage had transformed not only the ranch but the hearts and minds of those around her. Samuel often reflected on how much their lives had changed. When he first met May, she had been a stranger, brought to him as a cruel joke. The circumstances had been unfair, and yet they had led to something extraordinary. May had become not only an invaluable partner in work, but a true friend, someone who had enriched his life in ways he could never have anticipated. Her presence had brought hope, strength, and joy to a once lonely rancher, proving that life's unexpected turns could sometimes lead to the most meaningful and rewarding outcomes. The years that followed continued in a steady rhythm of work, learning, and growth. Samuel and May expanded the ranch, planted more crops, and cared for a growing herd of animals. Their home became a place of warmth, laughter, and shared accomplishment. May's influence on the town continued to grow as people came to recognize the wisdom, courage, and skill that she brought to every task. Children learned from her, neighbors relied on her, and Samuel knew that life had given him a partner whose value could never be measured in words alone. Through it all, the bond between Samuel and May deepened. It was built on shared labor, trust, respect, and understanding. They had faced storms together, both literal and figurative, and emerged stronger each time. They had built a life that was more than survival. It was a life of purpose, dignity, and fulfillment. Samuel often thought back to the market where she had been sold as a joke, amazed at how far they had come. What had begun as a cruel act had turned into a story of triumph, friendship, and mutual respect that would be remembered for years to come. By the time summer arrived, the ranch was thriving. The animals were healthy, the fields were abundant, and the cabin that Samuel had once considered modest now seemed full of life and energy. The town's respect for May and Samuel had grown into admiration. People spoke of them together, recounting stories of bravery, hard work, and partnership. May, once doubted and underestimated, had become the pride of the plains, a living example of what courage, intelligence, and perseverance could achieve. Samuel understood that their success was not only in the land or the animals, but in the relationship they had built. May had taught him patience, courage, and the importance of valuing the people around him. She had shown that true strength lay in resilience, kindness, and skill, and that character mattered more than origin or circumstance. The lessons they had learned together were ones that Samuel knew would guide them for the rest of their lives. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Samuel and May sat together on the porch of the cabin. They watched the animals grazing peacefully and listened to the quiet hum of life around them. The memory of the market, the cruel joke, and the uncertainty of that first meeting seemed distant now, replaced by the deep satisfaction of knowing they had built something lasting and meaningful together. Samuel felt a sense of gratitude and wonder at the journey they had shared, realizing that the twists of fate had brought them exactly where they needed to be. In the years that followed, their story became known across the plains. Travelers, neighbors, and families spoke of May's bravery, intelligence, and kindness. Samuel and May were admired not just for the success of the ranch, but for the way they had faced life's challenges together, turning adversity into opportunity, doubt into respect, and a cruel joke into a story of triumph. The lessons they lived by, hard work, courage, trust, and respect, were remembered and shared, inspiring others to see the value in determination, kindness, and partnership. May herself continued to live with humility. She never sought praise, but her reputation carried weight wherever she went. Children looked up to her, neighbors consulted her, and even strangers who heard her story felt a sense of awe. Samuel often watched her quietly, realizing that her true greatness lay not only in what she had accomplished, but in the way she carried herself, with dignity, grace, and unwavering courage. She had transformed not only the ranch, but the lives of everyone around her. As Samuel reflected on their journey, he realized something profound. Life was unpredictable, sometimes unfair and often challenging, but it was also full of possibility. A cruel joke that had brought May to the ranch could have ended in disappointment or regret. Instead, it had led to growth, respect, and joy beyond measure. Samuel knew that he had not only gained a skilled partner but a lifelong friend, someone who had changed his life completely, showing him the power of courage, resilience, and unwavering heart. In the end, May had become more than anyone could have imagined. She was a hero, a guide, a teacher, and a symbol of hope. Samuel knew that the plains, with their endless skies and rolling hills, had tested them both, but in every challenge, they had grown stronger. May, once the subject of a cruel joke, had become the pride of the plains, a living testament to the power of character, skill, and determination. Samuel often looked at her and felt a quiet pride and deep gratitude, knowing that life had brought them together for a reason. Together they continued to live on the ranch, working the land, caring for the animals, and strengthening their bond. Their story became one of legend in the town and across the plains, a tale of courage, perseverance, and the remarkable journey of a girl who had been underestimated and a man who had given her a chance. Samuel and May had faced storms, skepticism, and hardship, yet they had emerged stronger, wiser, and closer than ever. Their partnership was proof that even the harshest beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes when met with courage, respect, and unwavering dedication. And so, the plains, once a lonely and challenging place, became a home filled with hope, accomplishment, and pride. Samuel and May had turned an unlikely beginning into a life rich with friendship, respect, and shared purpose. The girl once sold as a joke had become the pride of the plains, leaving a legacy of courage, determination, and inspiration for all who heard her story. Samuel knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, ready to meet the future with skill, heart, and an unbreakable bond forged through years of shared struggle and triumph.